cover all different types here. We are being listened to, ladies and gentlemen, as we speak, by probably several billions on a live feed all around the world. Quite incredible. It's possibly the biggest audience ever for a debate, possibly. There are certainly well over 1,000 following on Twitter, and a lot of questions are coming in from Twitter all the time. And how have you voted? Well, don't knows. There's some 200 of you who haven't voted at all so far, but amongst the don't knows, 389. Those voting for the motion, which, to remind you, is that atheism is the new fundamentalism, 333. And against, this is before the debate voting as you were coming in, against the motion, 675. The question is, how is that going to transfer during the course of the evening now you've heard the debate? And let's move straight on to the questions, please. Now I'm going to take questions in groups of 3. And it would be helpful, obviously, to have the House lights up, and so I can see where the questions are. There's a question here. It could be a lady, could be a gentleman, certainly a human being. Could be an atheist, could be an agnostic, and off we go.
Portlock, and I've got a question for both Professor Dawkins and Grayling. And I'd like to start, first off, by praising Professor Dawkins, saying...
OK, I'm going to be a fascist, whether a liberal fascist or not, and just ask, could we, with so many questions, can we just get straight to the question?
Let's cut to the quick. Professor Dawkins says that atheism has no catechism. Well, now, I'm a disabled person, and as a disabled person, I have quite strong feelings about the issue of assisted suicide. I'm basically opposed to it. I looked at the British Humanist Association website, and they not only are in favour of assisted suicide, but have, as Richard Herries will know, stigmatised those who also, like me, are opposed to assisted suicide, portraying us as selfish.
The question being...
Richard Dawkins has stated online, there's a quote from Richard Dawkins about how if he reaches a certain state of health, he would like to be put down. Christopher Hitchens has made a few not very sensitive use of disability language. I can't comment on AC grading. My contention is that for the new atheists, the rejection of the idea of that life is to be preserved in most cases is as much a statement of dogma as the Holy Trinity is for Christians.
Thank you very much for that question. Second question, lady over here. And do we have a microphone on the third question? Because there are a lot of questions over here. We have a third question. Second question, please. Lady in red.
This is a quotation from Robert Halliday, Professor of Philosophy at Syracuse University. It is, if the gods or God love justice because it is right, then rightness of justice is prior to God's loving it. God is not the source of the rightness of justice, but commands it because it is already right. God is therefore not necessary for a moral order in the universe. Would you please discuss?
I love discussion. We are a school after all, but I'm even keener on precise questions. Let's have the third question over here, please.
Hello. I am interested. There can be fundamentalists on both sides, it seems to me. It's very easy to pick out people who are fundamentalists. The argument that Richard Dawkins was putting, which was that you cannot have a fundamentalist on the atheist side, is it not a fundamentalist position to say there is no God?
Thank you for that short question. Chris, and I think let's begin with Richard on that.
I will begin, if I may.
We've got lots of Richards up here. Thank you. Very good, Richard. Please go.
I will just respond to the second question, if I may, by saying, of course, all human beings can have a sense of justice whether they're believers or not. And that is actually fundamental to a classical Christian view, because we believe that all human beings have been made in the image of God, and part of that is a capacity for discerning what is right and wrong. What happens if, in the light of our sense of justice, we come to believe that God is good, all good, our true and everlasting God, good, obviously that shapes and colours our whole sense of what it is to be just.
Thank you for that. Richard Dawkins.
The first question, am I audible? I'll answer the first question on assisted suicide. I think it's a simple matter of individual freedom. If you don't want to go on living, who are society to stop you ceasing your life in a humane way? There's an additional point to this, which is that there are some people, and I know of at least one personally, who have committed suicide themselves long before they needed to or even strictly wanted to, because they wanted to do it while they were still in command of their faculties. And if they had known that when the time later came and they were no longer in command, sufficiently in command of their faculties to do the deed themselves, there would be a doctor to help them. So if you allow assisted suicide, you might actually end up getting fewer suicides, or at least later suicides.
And then a quick response from, first of all, Charles Moore.
I want to pick up the question about, is it fundamentalist to say that there is no God? Did you notice that atheist bus campaign that they had? On the side it said, there's probably no God. And the reason they said that, I think, is they realised they were in a bit of a muddle about this, because they could only truthfully say, according to their own position, that there's probably no God, because if they said there is no God, they would be making a statement of faith, and of course they feel they mustn't do that. So they were actually in a bit of a muddle about what on earth they were talking about.
Richard's not in a muddle.
What could be more fundamentalist than saying there is definitely no God? We demonstrated our lack of fundamentalism by saying the proper scientific thing, there's probably no God.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Anthony once. So, Richard, does that mean there may be a God, logically?
There may be a leprechaun.
If I might say yes. You can't let Richard get away with that. That's a ridiculous remark. No. That is a ridiculous remark.
Okay,
you cannot confuse the God of classical theism, which has animated the whole of Western philosophy, with a leprechaun, and I'm surprised at you.
I'm sorry. Anthony says you can.
Look, firstly, with great respect to Charles Moore, it's he who's rather confused about the atheist bus. We did want to say there is no God on the bus, and it turned out that the Advertising Standards Authority required of us that we insert a probably there, despite the fact that the very many theist adverts on buses say things like Jesus saves and so on, rather unequivocally. But may I just point out something? Richard's remark about the leprechaun, it does remind me of the old Irish lady who was asked if she believed in leprechauns, and she said, I do not, but they're there anyway. And I have to remind Richard Harries that he is an atheist, and I would be quite unequivocal about the gods of Olympus, Aphrodite, Ares, and the rest. The Norse gods,
Christians were called atheists.
They were indeed, because
this is a debate, you know. I mean, I was going to ask Anthony, if you saw a leprechaun, what would you then say?
I would try to imitate an Irish accent and say, hello.
Well, it's quite a good try. I guess we're going to go over here to a question.
Could I ask Commandant Dawkins to comment on how he feels being characterised as the guard in Charles Moore's analogy, I think, when in fact we know that it's religious people over the centuries who tried to be the guardians of our morals, deciding on when we can trade on a Sunday, whether we can have abortions, and when we eat fish.
So how do you feel about that one? Just stay that away for 1 minute. Question number 2 over here. Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to make a point about some schools that study religion from an evolutionary point of view.
Can I just say... Yeah.
They think that evolution is an adaptation that provides